No one expected the room to go silent, not the audience, not the producers, and certainly not the sharp-tongued talk show host who thought she had the upper hand. What was supposed to be a tense interview turned into a moment that stopped live television cold. And the woman at the center of it all never raised her voice even once. Simone Jackson was not your average entrepreneur. At just 32 years old, she had built a powerful business empire from the ground up. It was not the kind of success that existed only on paper or in bank accounts. Her work reached into real neighborhoods, real families, and real futures. Born and raised in Birmingham, Alabama, Simone believed that success meant nothing if it did not create opportunities for others. She had lived the gaps, she had seen the closed doors, and instead of complaining about them, she built new ones and handed out keys. Her latest project was her proudest achievement yet. It was a bold initiative designed to give young Black women access to business mentorship, funding guidance, and real-world resources, not theory, not motivation quotes, real tools, real support, real chances. So when Simone received an invitation to appear on Morning Perspective, one of the most watched talk shows in the country, she was genuinely excited. This was not about fame. This was about visibility. It was about putting the stories of these young women on a national stage and showing what talent and support could do together. The host of the show, Charlene Whittaker, was known across the media world. She was sharp, polished, and famously confrontational. Some people admired her boldness, others found her exhausting. She built her brand on asking uncomfortable questions and pushing guests until they cracked. Simone knew all of this, but she was not afraid. She had survived tougher rooms than a television studio. She had defended her ideas in boardrooms where no one wanted to hear her speak. This interview was just another conversation, or so she thought. On the morning of the show, Simone arrived at the Los Angeles studio wearing a teal suit that reflected both confidence and calm. A makeup artist smiled and told her she looked radiant. Simone thanked her, even though her nerves were quietly fluttering beneath the surface. As she stepped onto the brightly lit set, she took a deep breath. The studio buzzed with energy, cameras moved into position, crew members whispered into headsets, the audience chatted softly as they waited. Charlene sat in her chair, perfectly composed, and flashed Simone a wide smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Simone Jackson, ladies and gentlemen, Charlene announced to loud applause, a self-made entrepreneur who claims she is changing the rules of business. Simone, welcome. Simone returned the smile, warm and steady. Thank you, Charlene. I am happy to be here and grateful for the chance to talk about the work we are doing. The first part of the interview felt easy. Simone shared her journey. She talked about selling handmade jewelry at flea markets as a teenager. She spoke about learning hard lessons, failing forward, and building a company brick by brick. Charlene nodded, occasionally interrupting with questions that seemed fair enough. Everything felt normal, but then the tone shifted. As Simone began explaining her community-based initiative, Charlene's compliments took on a sharper edge. They sounded polished but hollow. Then Charlene tilted her head and asked, almost casually, "Do you think programs like yours exist because people just are not working hard enough on their own?" The room tightened. Simone paused, then answered calmly, "It is not about effort. People work incredibly hard every day. It is about recognizing that systems are not equal and that some people face barriers others never see. Our goal is to create paths through those barriers." Polite applause followed, but Charlene's smile grew wider, like she had been waiting for that answer. She leaned forward. "I hear you," she said, "but don't you think talking about barriers can sound like making excuses? After all, plenty of people pull themselves up by their bootstraps. That is the American dream, right?" The audience murmured. Some clapped, some shifted uncomfortably. Simone stayed composed. She smiled slightly. "The American dream is powerful in theory," she said, "but it ignores the reality that not everyone starts in the same place. Boots are great, but what if they have no laces, or worse, what if someone took them before you even got the chance to wear them?" Laughter and applause rolled through the studio. Simone continued, "My program does not tie anyone's shoes. It simply makes sure they have laces so they can walk on their own. Charlene glanced briefly toward the producers. She was not finished. That is clever, she said. But some people think focusing on race and inequality just creates division. Shouldn't we focus on unity instead? Unity matters, Simone replied. But you cannot build a bridge without admitting there is a river. Ignoring differences does not remove them, it just leaves people stuck on opposite sides. The applause came louder this time. Charlene shifted in her seat. Let's be specific, she said. Your program focuses on young black women. Why not open it to everyone? Isn't that exclusion? Simone answered without hesitation. It is not exclusion. It is intention. When you see where a problem exists, you address it directly. If a roof is leaking, you do not rebuild the entire house. You fix the leak. Helping one group rise helps whole communities rise with them. The energy in the room changed. Charlene crossed her arms. Some critics say programs like yours promote dependency. How do you respond to that? Simone's eyebrow lifted slightly. Dependency, she repeated. Let me ask you something. When banks give loans to businesses, is that dependency or investment? Because what we provide is investment. Opportunity creates independence. Lack of opportunity creates struggle. The audience erupted. Even crew members nodded. Charlene adjusted her posture, clearly unsettled, but she pressed on. People feel left out, she said. Everyone wants to feel included. Inclusion does not mean ignoring reality, Simone replied. If one child needs extra help, you do not deny it just to keep things equal. You support them so everyone can succeed. Silence fell. Then Charlene smirked. Don't you think focusing on race keeps us divided? Some might even call it segregation. The audience gasped. Simone took a breath. Segregation was about closing doors, she said. What I do is open doors that were shut for generations. You cannot fix damage by pretending it never happened. The applause was thunderous. Charlene tried to regain control, but then she pushed again. What about fairness? Aren't others being left behind? Simone leaned forward. When firefighters put out a burning house, do we accuse them of ignoring houses that are not on fire? Or do we thank them for protecting the neighborhood? The studio froze, and Simone was not done. The silence in the studio felt heavy, not awkward but powerful. Even the camera seemed to hesitate. Simone's words hung in the air as she sat upright, calm and steady, while Charlene stared back at her, clearly searching for a way to regain control of the conversation. That is what this program is about, Simone continued, her voice even but firm. It is about putting out fires. It is about helping people who have been overlooked for far too long. And when we lift them up, it does not take anything away from anyone else. It adds value to the whole community. Charlene opened her mouth to reply, but Simone gently raised her hand, not in a rude way, not in a dramatic way, just enough to make it clear she had something important to finish saying. And let's be honest, Simone added, fairness is not always what these conversations are really about. They are about comfort. Whose comfort are we protecting, and whose pain are we willing to ignore? If addressing injustice makes people uncomfortable, maybe that discomfort is necessary. The reaction was instant. The audience stood. Applause filled the studio, loud and sustained. Some people cheered. Others nodded with tears in their eyes. Simone leaned back slightly, her expression composed, but her eyes reflected quiet intensity. She knew her words had landed exactly where they needed to. Charlene, on the other hand, looked shaken. She reached for her water glass, took a quick sip, and forced a tight laugh. "You are clearly passionate," she said. "I can see why people support your work." Then, just as Charlene prepared to pivot to another question, Simone spoke again, politely but firmly. "Before you ask anything else, Charlene, may I ask you something?" The shift in power was undeniable. The audience leaned forward. Even the crew seemed to hold their breath. "When you hear stories about people pulling themselves up by their bootstraps," Simone asked, "do you ever stop to ask who made the boots? And who decided which ones were worth investing in?" Charlene froze. The question was sharp, precise, and impossible to dodge. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. The seconds stretched. The cameras zoomed in, capturing the pause live. Simone sat calmly, hands folded, her posture relaxed but unyielding. The audience murmured. Someone shouted, "Say it louder." Laughter and applause followed. The moment was no longer just an interview. It was history unfolding in real time. Charlene finally cleared her throat. "Well, Simone," she said stiffly, "I suppose we will have to agree to disagree on some points, but I do appreciate your perspective." Simone smiled, gracious and controlled, "And I appreciate the opportunity to share it." The producers quickly cut to commercial, but the damage was already done. Phones lit up across the studio. Clips were being shared before the show even went off air. Within minutes, hashtags began trending. Simone Jackson, morning perspective, putting out fires. Backstage, Simone sat quietly in her dressing room, finally letting herself exhale. Her phone buzzed non-stop. Messages from friends, emails from supporters, mentions from people she had never met, thanking her for saying what they had always felt but never heard spoken so clearly on television. Of course, not everyone was supportive. Some comments accused her of being divisive, others claimed she was too aggressive. Simone barely flinched. She knew those criticisms were not really about her tone. They were about her refusal to make herself smaller for the comfort of others. Later that night, alone in her hotel room overlooking the city, Simone reflected on the day. The interview had been intense, but it was also necessary. She thought about the young women in her program. Girls who might watch that clip and see possibility instead of limits, strength instead of silence. A knock came at the door. Her assistant peeked in, smiling wide. "You are everywhere," she said. CNN just picked it up. "They are calling it one of the most powerful live TV moments of the year." Simone shook her head gently. "It is not about me," she said. "It is about the message." Her assistant held up Simone's phone. "You might want to see this." Bayance just shared the clip. Simone laughed softly, the tension easing for the first time all day. "Well," she said, "I cannot argue with that." The buzz did not fade overnight, it grew. News outlets debated the interview. Commentators analyzed every word. Social media continued to amplify Simone's responses, but Simone stayed focused. Fame was never the goal, impact was. The next morning, back in Birmingham, Simone walked into the community center where her program met. A group of young women waited for her, eyes bright. One of them, a 19-year-old named Aaliyah, stepped forward, tears welling. "Miss Simone," she said, "I watched the interview. I saw how you stood up for us. You made me feel like I can do anything." Simone placed a hand on her shoulder and smiled. "You already can," she said. "I am just here to help you see it." Later that day, Simone addressed the group. "The world will not always give you respect," she told them. "Sometimes you will have to demand it. And when that happens, remember this. Your voice, your story, and your worth are not up for debate." The room was silent, but it was a powerful silence, one filled with belief. As the sun set behind the building, Simone stepped outside, reflecting on the journey. It had never been easy, but it had always been worth it, and she knew this was only the beginning. The following days moved quickly, but the impact of that single interview kept spreading far beyond the studio walls. Simone's phone barely rested in her hand. Every few minutes there was another alert, another message, another reminder that her words had traveled farther than she ever expected. News programs replayed the clip, podcasts discussed it, comment sections filled with debates, praise, and resistance. Some people called her brave, others called her dangerous. Simone understood both reactions. Change always made noise, and silence had never helped anyone. What stayed with her most were the messages from young women, students, first-time business owners, mothers, daughters, women who had been told their whole lives to wait their turn or lower their voices. They wrote to her saying they felt seen. They wrote that for the first time they watched someone who looked like them speak without apology on national television. Simone responded when she could, even if it was just a few words. Keep going, you matter, do not shrink. Meanwhile, Morning Perspective faced its own storm. Viewers questioned Charlene's approach. Sponsors quietly asked producers uncomfortable questions. Clips of the long silence after Simone's final question became the most replayed moment of the week. The silence said more than any argument ever could. Charlene did not comment publicly for several days. When she finally did, it was brief. She said she welcomed difficult conversations and stood by her role as a challenger of ideas. But those who watched closely could see something had shifted, the audience had changed, the balance had changed. Simone, however, did not dwell on Charlene or the show. She returned to work, meetings, workshops, mentorship calls. The real work continued quietly, just as it always had. At one workshop, Simone sat in a circle with a group of young women, listening as they shared their goals. One wanted to start a tech company. Another dreamed of opening a bookstore. Another wanted to build a nonprofit of her own one day. Simone listened more than she spoke. This was where she felt most grounded. One of the women asked her if she had been scared on television. Simone smiled honestly. Of course I was. Courage is not the absence of fear, it is speaking anyway. Another asked how she stayed calm when being challenged. Simone paused. I remind myself why I am there. When you know your purpose, other people's opinions lose power. As weeks passed, funding inquiries increased, partnerships formed, applications to Simone's program doubled. The momentum became real, measurable, and undeniable. One evening, Simone sat alone again, not in a hotel this time, but at home. The house was quiet. She replayed the interview in her mind, not with pride, but with clarity. She knew she had not won anything. She had simply told the truth in a place where truth was rarely spoken plainly. She thought back to her younger self, the girl at the flea market table, the girl who had been underestimated, the girl who learned early that silence did not protect you. She wished she could tell that girl what she knew now, that your voice grows stronger every time you use it. Simone also knew backlash would come again. There would be more interviews, more resistance, more attempts to twist her words, but she was ready, not because she enjoyed conflict, but because the cost of silence was too high. At a community event weeks later, Simone stood before a crowd, not cameras. No bright lights, no applause signs, just people. She spoke simply. Change does not start on television, she said. It starts in rooms like this. It starts when you decide to care about something bigger than comfort. She reminded them that impact does not require a platform. It requires action, mentoring one person, supporting one idea, standing up once when it would be easier to sit down. As she finished speaking, there was no roaring applause. Just quiet nods, quiet resolve, and that felt just as powerful. Walking out into the evening air, Simone felt a deep sense of peace. She knew the road ahead would not be smooth, but it would be meaningful. Her story was never meant to be about winning arguments or going viral. It was about making space, about opening doors, about lighting paths where none existed before. And if speaking her truth made some people uncomfortable, she had learned to accept that. Growth often begins that way. Simone Jackson did not change the world in one interview, but she reminded people that voices, when used with clarity and courage, can shift the ground beneath our feet. And that reminder would continue to echo long after the cameras stopped rolling.